If you've ever looked at your RV roof and thought, I have no idea if the sealant is still good, you're in the right place. Today I'm walking you through the entire process, start to finish, inspecting old sealant, removing what's failed, and properly resealing it so it actually lasts. This video has been requested for a long time and for good reason. It's one of the most overlooked maintenance items that turns into expensive repairs when it's ignored. Now, RV sealant is one of those topics that has lots of opinions. I'm not claiming to be the world's sealant expert, but I do this work every day, and I'm going to show you exactly what works for me in the field. So if you want real-world results and practical tips, stick around. If you're just here to nitpick and complain, just hop over to the video in the next queue. But good suggestions and helpful tips are always welcome. And for your convenience, all the products I'm using in this video are linked in the description. You can also find the products and tools I use to maintain and repair RVs linked in our Amazon storefront, organized in idea lists that are easy to sort through. First, I'm going to show you how to inspect RV sealant, what's normal, and what needs to be replaced. Now, these are the tools you need for inspecting your RV sealant. A phone to take some pictures, a flashlight helps you spot some of those areas that aren't so easy to see, and some tape to mark areas you find so you don't forget about them later. Now, how often should you check your RV sealant? The RV manufacturer recommends every 90 days. This doesn't mean you have to get out a caulk gun every 90 days. It means you need to be looking at the sealant so that way you know when areas need to be resealed and catch them before it's too late. Now let me show you some examples of good and bad sealant. So let's give you some baseline here. So this here is the roof material. You can see the roof material itself starting to get some cracks into it. That's a different subject. We're not going to cover that in the sealant video, but that is a future issue. Now, roof materials here. Up here is your front cap. This is fiberglass. This is your rubber material. This trim between here, this is your front cap trim rail. Now on this sealant, you can see some cracks forming in there. If you look close right here, you'll see some gaps between the sealant and that trim rail. On the other side here, this is just paint flaking. So it's not really a sealant issue there. That's just cosmetic. Now going down this way, you can see somebody has resealed this before, but didn't put enough sealant right there because the gap formed right away. Going down further, they sealed the whole thing and covered it. This is some good sealant. I'm going to put some examples on the screen of some RV sealant that does not need to be resealed. That's in really good shape. Here are some examples of bad RV sealant that just needs to be resealed. Here are some examples of bad RV sealant that needs to be scraped off before new sealant can be put on. Now, a commonly asked question is what areas leak first on most RVs? The first areas I go to on the roof are the four corners. That's going to be over here. Let me show you. So your corners are this radius area that goes down from the roof to your gutter down here. Right here on this trim, this area opens up the most. You can see a little gap forming right here. The reason being, the roof is down here and the trim wants to push up here naturally when it warms up. So it always creates a separation between the trim and the roof right in there. So you'd want to make sure this area is sealed because I see this open up quite often on RVs. And not just the roof side, make sure you're looking at this area over here towards the front cap. And on this RV, this area is good and sealed. And the other common area is popped air bubbles and sealant. It's really hard to see, but you see that little spot right there? That was an air bubble that is popped and water can get into that area. In some areas, like over here, I'm going to show you, this has some air bubbles that are going to pop. So that one is starting, but this one over here, I can pop it. So when that air bubble pops, you can see the screw right below that. Water will get in and around that screw. So by catching those areas before they leak can prevent future water damage. Now the next big question, how do I spot hidden leaks before damage starts? This is looking at sealant that's not stuck and you can lift it up. So it's typically on a skylight. You're looking at this sealant here. If you take your fingernail and pull on it, This one is stuck well and sealed, but I had an RV, the one you're looking at on the screen right now. The sealant looked great from a distance. When I grabbed it, you can pull it and peel it right up. Water can definitely get underneath of it if you can pull it up and it's not stuck, and that can create lots of water damage. I've seen that way too many times. Now let's cover how sun affects sealant. This will mostly just change the color of the sealant. Like the skylight right here, you can see the sun's been affecting it. Yes, trees over top, so it's dirty, but this is a yellowed skylight. The sealant itself isn't too bad around there, but what happens in these southern climates especially, the sun has strong UV rays. Those UV rays are harder on sealant and roof material in general, and it'll dry out that sealant and make it crack sooner. When that sealant starts cracking, water can leak in and water damage can happen. Now the most popular question, can I just reseal over old sealant, or do I have to scrape it off to reseal? First off, RV sealant is designed to be able to reseal on top of each other, but you need to make sure it's pliable first. So pliable means it's soft and has a good base layer to it. Put my fingernail into it, you can see it's making a nice indent. Of course, you'd have to clean this to make sure the new sealant will bond to it, but if this sealant was dry and cracked and crusty, you'd have to scrape it off to make a nice good reseal. Now, RV sealant has a limit to it, how many times you can reseal it. So if you've resealed it 2 or 3 times, now it has 4 layers, that base layer plus your 2 or 3 reseals, and now you're at 3 or 4 layers of sealant. If you're resealing that, most likely the base foundation layer is dry and cracked, and you won't have a good bond to the roof itself. When the sealant gets really thick like that, I would recommend scraping it off and starting over. Now you have one nice good layer of sealant that'll seal really well. Next, we're going to cover different types of RV roof sealants, where to use them, and common mistakes RV owners make. Now I'm going to show you the 3 main types of RV sealants that I use, and then I'll cover some other sealants for different roof types. Now, Dicor is a main product that I use, and there's different types. So let's cover self-leveling first. So self-leveling, as it sounds, it levels out by itself. So this here was self-leveling when it was put on initially. And self-leveling, what it does is you'll put it on, it'll flatten out, it'll kind of flow a little bit toward the sides. And self-leveling is great in the flat areas of the roof. Now let's go over here to the corner. This is where non-sag Dicor comes in. When you're close to the corner like this or going down the edge, it'll stay where you put it. It doesn't flatten out like self-leveling. So the transition from non-sag to self-leveling is right about here. So this is self-leveling here where it flattens out, and going down this way is going to be non-sag Dicor. And the third type of RV sealant I use is ProFlex. Now ProFlex is not for the rubber roof side. So the side over here we use Dicor. ProFlex will not stick here and does not work. It's for the other side where your fiberglass is. So the trim's in the middle. Dicor is over here. We use a non-sag in this section. We'd use ProFlex the other side of that trim on this area. As you can see on this RV, different type of sealant was used here compared to here. So our ProFlex starts the opposite side of that trim where we use the non-sag Dicor going down that roof, and anywhere else in the sidewall of the RV that is not the rubber roof material, you can use that ProFlex. Now I'll pop a picture up on the screen where you can see each type of RV sealant and where it's used. Okay, so we covered these 3 types of sealants, and your Dicor, that's good for EPDM, TPO, PVC, fiberglass, or aluminum roofs. And your ProFlex is for anywhere not touching the roof material, so your corners and going down toward the side of the RV. Now, other manufacturers will use other types of sealants. So motorhomes are usually where I see this, like a Winnebago or a Tiffin motorhome. They'll use a silicone-based roof sealant that works for them on the fiberglass roofs. I don't have that to show you as an example. I'll pop some up on the screen. And other manufacturers will use an alpha sealant. I see this a lot on Keystone or Grand Design RVs. Alpha sealant is similar, like a side-by-side, like Dicor is made for the roof material, but it's a different brand. Alpha sealants are made for their alpha roofs. And Airstreams will use a Sika-based sealant. I don't get into sealing those, don't stock that, but Sika sealant is what you use for that. Now, if you're not sure what type of roof you have or what sealant you should use, I'd recommend reaching out to the manufacturer to see what they recommend. That way you're putting a compatible product on and you won't have an issue in the future. So is Dicor always the right type of roof sealant to use? Well, this covers 80% of the roofs that I see, There's some other options out there like your alpha roofs, which are TPO. This does cover that, by the way, or your fiberglass or aluminum roofs. When you're looking on the internet, you'll see a mixed bag of opinions on what sealant to use. This is what I use. I've had great results with it and I trust it. So this is all I stock. Now, can household silicone be used on an RV? Well, inside, like the kitchen and bathroom silicone works great. On the outside of the RV, this is not going to stick well and cause lots of issues. So keep this inside the RV in those kitchens and bathrooms. Now, the big sealant fight you'll see online is why can't I use household roof sealant on the roof of my RV? I mean, it's made to last 30, 40, 50 years, right? It should be perfect for an RV. I'll never have to touch it again, is what you'll see. But the differences are between an RV and a house is the RV has different types of materials, especially ones that drive down the road. Things flex, vibrate, they shake, they expand and contract at different rates compared to a house, which is set on a foundation. It's not driving down the road, and putting a sealant is not made for the flexing and stretching on an RV. When an RV flexes and stretches, will crack and separate and lead to water damage and lots of issues. But it's up to you. If your RV is parked and you want to use household sealant on your RV, I'm not going to stop you. I'm showing you in this video what products are made for RVs and how to maintain them properly. Now, what happens if I mix RV sealants? Usually what I see is when silicone is used on the roof of an RV. So for example, right here is self-leveling Dicor sealant. If someone was to clean this and prep it, then put silicone on it, it'll look good because I'll probably smooth it off and everything. But what happens is it doesn't stick. When that silicone is on the roof for a while, it goes through some heating and cooling cycles. You take that silicone, it'll peel right off. And when the silicone's been used, it leaves a little residue behind, which makes it even harder to put the proper sealant down because it's preventing that new layer of Dicor to seal to the old layer of Dicor sealant. Now, another frequently asked question, someone asked, I put new sealant on a few months ago, why is it peeling off already? Well, one of the common things I see is if someone used alpha sealant and didn't prime the surface beforehand, the sealant doesn't stick to that surface. You need to make sure you use a proper sequence and a primer when using alpha sealant, particularly on smooth plastics. And the other thing I see is the surface was not prepped well. Your new sealant was put over top of a dirty surface, so the new sealant can't bond to the old sealant because a layer of dirt is stuck in the middle. Now, how long should my RV sealant last? This really depends on where your RV is located and the climate that you're in. In Texas, I'll see RV sealant breaking down in about 2 to 3 years. But in Michigan, I won't see the same level of breakdown until about 10 years. So the UV rays in southern climates are much harsher than those in northern climates. So if you're in the southern climates, make sure you're checking your RV sealant more often because it's breaking down faster. Okay, there's 2 huge mistakes I see DIY RV owners making with their RV roofs. The first one is roof coatings. Now this is a touchy subject, I know, but it really depends on what level your roof is in, if it needs a coating or not. So if you put your coating on that roof when it was brand new, yes, it will coat the roof, but when you have to do things like reseal this, the roof coating is in the way, you have to chip it off. Now the water gets below that roof coating. Plus, it makes it very hard to make a good reseal and keep these seams sealed up because the roof coating is in the way. What a roof coating is good for is a roof like this. So this was an EPDM roof. You start seeing some cracking in the top layer. This roof could use a coating on it and it would not hurt anything. But the challenge is, if you feel this, and you see that on my hands, so the roof material flakes off a little bit, so it says dry. Putting a roof coating onto a roof like this one has a hard time bonding to it because that dryness of that roof will break down and the roof coating was stuck to those, let's call them dirt pebbles, not quite, but a good example. And then that roof coating has nothing to stick to when that roof material breaks down, and now you'll see the roof popping back through again, and you have to do a lot of maintenance to recoat it. Now, I don't recommend putting a roof coating on your RV unless your RV roof is on its last leg. That means that roof material is broken down, and the only other option is peeling a whole roof off, putting a new roof down, which is very expensive. If you're at that point, and putting a new roof on is not feasible, too expensive, or the RV isn't worth it, that's when roof coating comes in and will get you by a little bit longer. Now, the only one I do recommend is RV Roof Armor. That is a professional coating. You have to take your RV into a shop. They spray it on. It's a very thick coating, which is much different than those hardware store coatings that you roll onto the roof. And the other thing I see is people say they're going to future-proof their roof. What they're meaning by that is putting a turn-a-bond tape all over the RV roof, and they say you'll never have to touch it again because the turn-a-bond will outlive the roof of the RV itself. Is a turn-a-bond tape good? Yes, but in the right circumstances. Because let's come back down here again. Okay, RV is built like this. There's sealant and there's a trim. You put your turn-a-bond tape over this, it won't stick well because there's lots of elevations and other issues. What a turn-a-bond tape is made for is flat areas like this when you need to patch a part of your roof. What happens is when people put the turn-a-bond tape over all the seams, especially when you're going around vents, there's a lot of different layers and seams going around that. There's intersections where that tape layers on top of each other. Water will creep inside of those intersections and get underneath of that tape and create water damage, and you're not inspecting your roof because you've future-proofed it, but that water is creeping below those seams and creating water damage. And the other thing I see with the tape when it's put over all of the seams is the tape and the roof material contract and expand at different rates, and you'll see bubbling where the tape will peel up and there'll be a gap where water goes right below the tape into your roof. Now, putting a tape on is totally up to you. Those are the issues I see in the field. Next, I'm going to show you how to remove RV sealant without damaging your roof. Now let's cover the tools and supplies needed to remove the sealant. So the heat gun is the most important one here to warm the sealant up to remove it, and then a couple nylon scrapers once it's already warmed up. But to start with, I'll use some Simple Green and a scrub brush to clean the area off first before we pull some sealant up, and of course some gloves because it's always messy. So I use Simple Green. You can also use like a Dawn dish soap diluted down with water. Just spray a little bit around. Use your scrub brush. And once you use your scrub brush, take a towel and just wipe up the extra. What I'm looking for here is cleaning the roof just outside of the sealant. I'm peeling the sealant off, so this doesn't really matter if it's clean or not. I just want to make sure the edge of it is clean. It's easier to do this beforehand because if you spray and scrub once your sealant is already removed, and then that water and stuff gets below the flange area. So we're keeping it out here where we can keep it dry. Now the area is clean. I'll use a heat gun. I'll warm up the sealant. I'll do about half of it and then do the other half. So you want to warm it up until it's nice and pliable. This really depends on how warm it is outside. If it's a 70, 80 degree day, you don't need quite as much warming. But if you're close to 50, the sealant takes a little bit longer to warm up. Just go back and forth a couple of times until the sealant is a little bit softer, and then we will start peeling. Now this process would be the same whether you're doing this on a vent like this, a skylight, a TV antenna like this guy over here, a front cap trim, anywhere on the roof that you're peeling off sealant. This process is the same. Warm the sealant up, peel it off, making sure you're very careful. Time and patience is very important when you're peeling up sealant, because if you go too fast, that's when you can poke a hole in the roof. And we'll cover that later, if you poke a hole in the roof, how to patch it. Okay, it's warmed up. Now I'm going to use a nylon scraper. It's old sealant stuck on there. And when you buy these new, they have a nice sharp pointed edge to them. This one, I've worn the edge down so it doesn't have a sharp edge. That sharp edge can poke a hole in the roof. So a little bit worn or rounded off scraper is perfect. The big fat one works good, or a small one like this. The small one, you can control it a little bit easier because the handle is closer to where you're working with. I'll start with this one and follow up with the short one. So if it's new, you can round the edge off. What works well for that is to take the edge, say you had a sidewalk, and just run it on some concrete, and that'll round that edge off. I don't want to do it on the roof so I don't poke something. So now, once our sealant is heated up, we'll use our nylon scraper. We'll use the first one. We'll just keep working it in, kind of rolling up the sealant in towards the vent, and do this the whole way around. If it feels too stiff, go back and warm it up some more. Now, as I mentioned, this process is the same whether it's a vent or a skylight or other areas of the roof. If you want to see a full process on replacing a skylight, you want to hop over and check out that video. Okay, I worked my way in to the vent. You can see the plastic right there. Now I use the shorter scraper. I'll just finish it off here. You want to almost like roll your sealant up. When you're rolling it up, it's going to come off a lot cleaner that way. So I'm halfway around. I'll do the same process on the other side, warm it up, and keep peeling. So you see how this is peeling up? Not quite like butter, but it's nice and soft and squishy. That's the perfect temperature. If you're trying to peel it up and you're fighting it, or you can't quite get the scraper in, you need to warm it up some more. There's probably a point you can heat it up too much. It'll just be really slimy, but I've never got there yet. So anytime I always heat it up a little bit extra, it just comes off a little bit easier. So now I'll keep going around the whole vent until all the sealant is scraped off and I can get down to the vent itself. So we'll be back in a second. So now what's the safest way to remove RV sealant? That's with heat and very slowly. Use lots of patience. Because if you go too fast, you can rip the roof material, put a hole into it. Then you had to put a patch over that section before you were to put sealant down again. By going nice and slow, you'll limit your risk of peeling things up. Now you're probably wondering, how long does it take to remove RV sealant? Well, that really depends on how big of an area you're working with, how thick the sealant is, how hard the sealant is, and how long you can bend over and kneel. Something like this, just about a half of an hour to go around this vent. If you were doing a big skylight or a full roof, you can be there for a couple hours or a couple days. Just depends on how much you have to work with. Now as you're looking at this, you're probably wondering, what happens if you leave bits of sealant behind? Like this right here is a thin layer of sealant. You can hear my glove sticking to it. Now that sealant's nice and tacky and pliable. The thin layer of sealant there will be not an issue at all for new sealant to stick on top of it. If it was really dry, you'd have to peel it up. But the thin layer here, trying to get that last little bit up, you can risk poking a hole in the roof, and there's no benefit of taking any more off than this. Want to make sure everything is clean, especially up here by the plastic itself, getting all the bits and pieces off. That's where the small scraper like this comes in to make sure everything is scraped off clean. Now, what happens if you tore the roof membrane when you're peeling up your sealant? If that was the case, you'd have to put an Eternabond patch over that. So let's say the hole was right here. I'd put a patch double or triple the size of that hole, and then that patch would be below. Then as you're resealing everything, you would seal over top of that patch, maybe go a little bit wider in that section. What that would do is create a two-layer seal. The patch would be your initial layer, and a sealant on top of that patch would be your second layer. And if you want to see the full process on putting on the patch, I do have a video on that. And now for one of our followers' questions, how do I remove your RV sealant without peeling the rubber roof membrane off the plywood decking? As I mentioned earlier, going slow and having patience is key to making sure you don't damage the roof itself. By heating up the sealant, using a nylon scraper to slowly peel and roll it off, it'll keep your rubber roof material stuck down to your plywood decking below it and not peel it up. And if you're pulling straight up on the sealant, you'll pull that roof material up and off the decking. By going sideways, slowly working your way in there, you will just work at the sealant itself and the roof will stay where it's supposed to stay. And next, I'm going to remove the sealant from the front cap trim area. Now, we get so many questions from people trying to reseal this area. This area right here does not need to be removed to be resealed. You can clean this to reseal it. But for demonstration purposes, starting from this area where somebody is partially resealed, to my right, I will remove the sealant so you can see what it would look like for the process to remove it and reseal on a front cap trim. So then on the left, I'll just show you cleaning and resealing because that's all that section needs. So I'll start here, I'll start scraping toward the corner. Okay, this side is just regular sealant by the trim, but on the front side, the full body paint overlapped on top of the sealant. Where that paint is loose and chipped and peeling, that needs to be removed, so when you reseal this area, you won't have loose stuff underneath, which will make your sealant not stick. And use the razor knife on the low edge down here, so I can slowly peel that paint off. If I use a plastic scraper in that case, it could peel the paint back here and make things look really bad. So by carefully going with the razor knife along there, I'm able to just trim the loose paint off, leaving down the paint that's there. Then we'll reseal over top that whole section later. Okay, I'm to the corner now. You see this process is the same as doing the vent. Heat it up, slowly peel it back, clean things off. And I use a towel here. This is dry right now, just to get anything that's loose and crumbly to come off. We'll do a prep before this is resealed, but this is just showing scraping sealant off at this point. So I need to do the corner over here next. Now Erica's gonna switch me and film off a ladder, and I'll scrape from the roof so you can see what's going on over here, because you can't see it from up there. Okay, all our sealant is now peeled off. You can see right there that gap between the roof and this trim area, because this trim is naturally made flat, so they have to curve it on top. That always makes it bubble out a little bit in that section. That's why this part of the roof is always so hard to keep sealed, because this trim wants to push outward, and then your roof is staying tight underneath of here. That creates a gap in this section. Next, I'm going to show you how to prep your RV roof before applying new sealant so it actually sticks. The tools and supplies you need for this process are going to be some cleaners. So I use Simple Green and a scrub brush for the initial cleaning, and I'll follow up with some 91% alcohol and a towel, so we'll clean things up afterwards. During the cleaning process, you'll probably need a nylon scraper to remove loose sealant, maybe a razor blade as well, and of course some gloves because this process is messy and sticky. So let me show you what we're working with. From this point to your right, I've removed the old sealant, and this point to your left, the old sealant is still here. The process is similar in both areas to clean it and prep it. I'm going to start on the existing sealant section, then work my way to your right to where that sealant's been removed to show you the whole process across the front cap. So let me grab my Simple Green and scrub brush, and we'll start cleaning to get the initial dirt off, and then we'll go down deeper from there. So what I'll do is I'll spray the Simple Green down, then use a scrub brush. You don't need to get too aggressive with it. You're just trying to remove the loose dirt and debris. Once you've scrubbed it loose, use your towel and wipe off the loose dirt and wet dirt you just created. Now the area that we're working with, is this sealant. I'm cleaning about 1 inch past it here. And yes, this roof has some cracking in the membrane. The customer knows that eventually this roof needs to be replaced, but we can still seal on top of this. That's not going to be an issue. I'm going to work my way down to the corner and then back closer towards the camera. So the question would be, how clean does it need to be before resealing? Are you going to get the sealant bright white like it was when it was brand new? Or this one, I believe, was gray. No, and it doesn't really matter. What you're looking for is removing the dirt and debris. So you can see there's dirt in this section. This RV is below a tree, so it gets dirty really fast, even though they clean the RV quite often. So we're cleaning off this section right here to make sure anything loose is removed. That's where the scrub brush comes in handy. Simple Green helps for the dirt portion of it. Now, once I've cleaned this section with the Simple Green, I will use the alcohol just to remove any soap residue or anything left from the Simple Green. This is 91%. I prefer that over the 70% because it is a little bit more powerful and cleans better. And I'm not going at it too aggressive. I'm just removing any last residue because the Simple Green removed all of the loose stuff. So that's this side. Next, I'll do the other side in a similar process. But before I use a cleaner, I'm going to remove anything that's loose. This paint that's chipping here, I'll remove that all the way across here. Then I can clean down to the surface I'll be resealing on top of. And having to use a razor knife like this is typically only something that has to be done when the RV has a paint job over the sealant like this. If this was a pre-painted front nose cone and the sealant was over top of that, the sealant will be just like this side on the roof, and you wouldn't have to peel paint off because it would not be on top of the sealant. This is a full body paint RV, so that's when they come across things like this. Okay, finish up with the scraper just to loosen up anything that was peeling. The paint that stuck well is not going to be an issue. I'm going to clean it the same way on this side as I did over here, just past the sealant, so that way all the dirt and debris is out of the way. Same process with this will be Simple Green and then the alcohol. Before that portion, I'm just going to take my dry rag, brush off that loose paint, so that way it's not stuck inside of my scrub brush. So now that half is done. I'm gonna do the same process over here, but Erica and I need to switch sides because she is in the way. These leaves are making a fun party today. I've blown this area off, I don't know how many times, to make it clear so you can see what I'm doing, but it's raining on me. One of those days that the leaves are deciding to shed. So this will be the same process. I'm spraying on the roof portion here, trying not to spray to the inside. So first layer was cleaned off with the Simple Green. Now we'll follow up with alcohol. Okay, let me pause in here for a second and talk about using brake cleaner, which when I initially was taught for cleaning prepping roof sealant, this is one of the methods that was shown to me. And I did a video on it before and I had tons of questions about people, oh my gosh, that's hard on roofs, it's made for brakes, not for roofs. Well, everything is a chemical to a point. And when I researched this, different types of brake cleaner have different types of petroleum or naphtha inside of it. And that product is what's hard on the roof itself. The process I was shown is spray this onto a microfiber towel. So spray it onto a section. And then that spot that's wet with brake clean, you would go across the sealant itself, keeping it isolated to the area you're working with. Then once you've had the loose dirt and debris removed with this, then follow up with alcohol for your final prep. By doing that, I never had an issue using brake cleaner at all. And I've also asked several RV roof manufacturers about the process. And they said, if you're doing it this way, just keeping it on the sealant and not letting it sit or just spraying it on in general, that would be an issue. But being responsible with it, it's not going to cause an issue. I do keep this inside of my cleaner tote. Once in a while, this is needed to get something stubborn off, which is usually on the sidewall of an RV, on the trim, when I'm trying to remove the sticky sealant where possibly a turnabout tape was used and a slide out, or changing a wiper seal in the slide out. So I really haven't had to use this since I've been using Simple Green to break down the dirt and debris in the top. So this seems to be much more environmental friendly and easier on any roof material. But again, in either process, I use alcohol to follow up afterwards. Now, somebody had asked, can I use acetone to clean my roof? Well, acetone is a lot harsher chemical than any of the ones I'm using, and that is known to eat rubber. So if you're using that on the roof, it's going to cause issues. The person maybe is thinking about Reseal, which is another type of chemical, similar properties to brake clean, and I know some other techs use that and don't have an issue. I haven't personally used it to know if it's good or bad. That's talking about Reseal, but don't use acetone. So now I'll go back to the cleaning process here. So I'll put some alcohol into my towel and remove anything that is left as far as the soaps and cleaners. Now, you'll see as I'm going across this, the old sealant is just rolling up a little bit. The little bit that's left there is not a problem. The new sealant will adhere to that. And removing anything that's loose, kind of working my way from the center towards the edge, keeps any of those loose marbles from being in the way and affecting the new layer of sealant. Okay, everything is now cleaned and ready to reseal. One question you're probably wondering is how long does it need to dry before I reseal? Well, if you have a day, especially like today, that's breezy, this stuff is already dry and ready to reseal. If you had a damp, humid day, 100% humidity, it's not going to dry as quickly. These leaves are crazy. Losing stuff up here. You know, I give it a few minutes before I come back. I'm not cleaning and resealing right afterwards, working my way across from one end to the other. So I started on the left side of the RV. I will reseal on that side first and finish on the right side. I'm also right-handed, so it's better for me to go that direction when I seal. So in my head, I always plan it out to clean the area first, that I'll reseal first, so that way it has time to dry in between. Next, I'm going to show you how to apply new RV sealant directly to the roof and to existing sealant. Now, let's dive into the tools needed for the process. So, first off, you need a good caulk gun. One like this is a 12-to-1 ratio, which provides a nice, smooth, even bead, much better than dollar store caulk guns like this. I'll show you the difference a little bit later. Another option is a power caulk gun. If you know how to use it, this is great for big jobs, but I would not start using it just to practice on a front cap like this. We'll need a utility knife to open up our tubes of sealants. Of course, some Dicor sealant, some gloves, paper towels, and another option are some wide seal tips made by JPX RV. So I'll show all these in the process. Now, I'm wearing gloves already. RV sealant is a messy process. I know some people always say, why do you wear gloves and all this work? Well, I try to keep my customers' RV clean, and doing work like this is definitely dirty. If you're a person that doesn't use gloves, you don't have to use them. That's totally up to you. All right, I start on the corners of the roof, so let me show you what we're working with down here. So this section right here is where I typically would use ProFlex RV sealant. The reason being is this joint goes all the way down to the side of the RV. This particular RV has silicone here, and this area here is sealed up well. There's no issues, so it does not need to be resealed. Talking about silicone versus ProFlex is a whole nother video to go over, but ProFlex does not stick over silicone, so I would not be able to lay over top of this. If I had to reseal this joint with ProFlex, I'd have to remove all of the silicone right down to the RV surface, so ProFlex would stick. So where ProFlex would go is from down here and stop right here. And on the other side of this trim, I would use non-sag Dicor sealant. So touching the roof material, this will weave back and forth all the way till it gets flat in the top. And the non-sag Dicor will come up a little further than ProFlex would to about right there. And then I'll go over top of this cap, and the non-sag Dicor will go over top of the ProFlex here. So that way any water that's going on top of the roof will run off of the Dicor and over top of the ProFlex. So that way you're making a multi-step layer. Now our self-leveling sealant will start where the non-sag Dicor started, go all the way across the front cap, from here to there, all the way across the RV. So I'm going to start in the corners first. If I was doing ProFlex, that would go first here. Next would be non-sag Dicor on this side, overlapping the ProFlex at the top. And then I would start on the left side Because I'm right-handed, it's easier for me to flow sealant on my right-hand side, working from the left to the right with the self-leveling sealant after the corners are done first. So let's load some non-sag sealant into our cut gun. Now, this is black non-sag Dicor. Reason being, I stock white, tan, or black. The side of the RV is a full body paint and it's dark, so black will blend in well here. If I use a bright white on this RV, it'll stand out like a sore thumb. So I'm going to use the black non-sag up to here. Once we're on the top, then I'll transition to white self-leveling sealant. This is a partial tube. I will tape the ends over like this. That way the sealant doesn't dry out in the meantime. You can see I peeled it off. It's still sticky in there. Let me grab my paper towel. Once I've peeled the tape off, I'll squeeze some out to make sure it's going to come out nice and smooth. Now I know the sealant is flowing really well. And just as an FYI, it always feels like black sealant gets everywhere, so I use a few extra gloves, maybe because it's darker and I see it more in my paper towel, but it always feels like it's a little bit extra messy. Now I'm going to start at the bottom, right down here by the gutter, and I will start working that sealant up towards the top in a weave-like motion. So I will tool this. Tooling it's calling smoothing out with your finger, just because it's on the edge to make sure everything looks nice and uniform. I'm just working that sealant upward, not over tooling it, so you're not working the sealant too thin, but I'm working it into the corner so it makes a nice good seal. Now it'll kind of stick to your finger here a little bit. And the reason that we use non-sag sealant on the sides of the RV is because if we use self-leveling, it'd be really, really runny and run down the side of the RV and look really, really bad. So all this will stay put. It'll level out just a little bit from the point you see right now after it settles out for a day. But this here will look just like that when we come back tomorrow or next year. As you can see, if I wasn't wearing gloves, I would be a complete mess right now. So I'm going to switch those out. I am now done with the non-sag sealant. I'm going to switch over to some self-leveling sealant and start right where I left off. Now I'm going to prep some tubes with self-leveling sealant. And if you look at the tip where it's angled and it flattens out right there, that's where I'll cut it at about a 45-degree angle. I will cut towards a box so I don't hurt myself or poke the hole in the roof. When you do that, it'll usually flop over like that, and I'll take that last little bit and I'll cut it off straight. Now if you look at that tip, you have an angle there, but you're flat on that top little section. That helps your sealant flow out of there. If this was pointed all the way like this, that little sharp tip will catch your sealant and it'll drag and it'll create some low spots and divots inside of your sealant. So letting it flow out like that is better. You can go a little bit flatter too if you wanted to, versus a 45, a little closer to straight, but more of an angle would cause you more issues trying to put sealant down. So I'm going to go through 3 or 4 tubes. I'm going to prep those now. And I'll also go through and pop them and put them back into the box so they don't roll away on me. So 4 new tubes are prepped. I have a partial one I was using yesterday. I'll start with that. So I'm going to use the manual caulk gun, resealing over existing sealant. And just as a reminder, the sealant is pliable. My fingernail goes into it really, really well. So this will reseal without an issue. The side on the right, I peeled it off so you can see what an example would be for scraping sealant off and resealing it. This section right here did not need to be scraped off, just cleaned so we can reseal it. So now I have my self-leveling sealant. I'm going to work in sections. So I'm going to do the right hand side first, up until about halfway point on the trim, then the left side, keep going back and forth in shorter sections. So I'll take the caulk gun, I'll start my bead, I'll create my outside perimeter, which is right where the old sealant meets the flat roof material. That's one long squeeze right there. Now I'll go back up to the beginning. I will start at my sealant, overlapping the non-sag sealant with a little bit thicker bead right there. Then I will weave back and forth, touching my right boundary, I'll call that, for my sealant I put down. The thickness is about 1/4 inch, because once this sealant cures and fully settles, it'll be about half the thickness. So if I only put it down about 1/8 of an inch to start with, it would thin out really fast and you'd have to come back and reseal it. By putting a nice layer down to start with, you don't have those issues. So that's the end of that first partial tube. Now we'll be going to a full tube. Now, as you can see, there's a couple things I'm doing different than what was down here before. Is from the factory, they just put a dab over top of the screw head. And also when it was resealed, they just put a bead over top of where the crack was, but the crack came back because there wasn't a thick enough seal. By going all the way from one side to the other, you've created one large band of sealant, so it'll resist the cracking and flexing and keep this area sealed up for a long time. So yes, it uses more sealant, but it saves sealant and issues in the long run because you're doing a better seal once, not having to come back and do little spot reseals all the time. Now, doing sealant when leaves are blowing around always makes the job fun. Ideally, I would pick a different day for this, but I'm in the middle of filming, so you get to see some of the real life challenges that are ran across when you're doing RV roof work, especially sealant. Now when I'm doing the other side of the trim, I'm hitting my other boundary, weaving back and forth, making sure the sealant is touching all areas, not creating any air pockets or holes. I call this welding the sealant together. Some people will do cornrows, which would be like this and this and this. That creates unevenness and a lot of air bubbles in your sealant. By going back and forth like this, that doesn't happen. Now I've got to the end of my outside boundary. I'll just go through and create a new boundary and keep sealing. It doesn't matter which side you do first. It kind of just goes on where my sealant ran out and where I want to keep resealing. All that matters is once you get to the end, you have fully resealed everything with no gaps or holes. So now the temperature that's ideal for resealing is definitely has to be over 40 degrees, otherwise sealant will have issues bonding and flowing. Dicor says between 70 and 80 degrees is ideal temperature. Trying to do that when you're out in the field is almost impossible. My ideal range is from 50 to 80 degrees. If you are resealing when it's warmer than 80, closer to 100, self-leveling sealant will be very, very runny, and it's hard to make a nice bead because it's practically flowing to the ground when you are putting it onto the roof. So a medium temperature today is in the 70s. You can see how the sealant is flowing. And yes, the leaves that are sticking, I will peel those off. And in this particular situation, I will come back the next day to peel off what's stuck because the sealant will be tacky for a while and all the leaves blowing will stick to it. Won't hurt anything, it's just cosmetic. So I had a little spot I missed back here. I came back and doubled it up. You can see it's getting thicker here because I'm talking, not moving the cut gun. So just always go back and look at your sealant to make sure you didn't miss any little spots or voids. If you do, when the sealant's still fresh, you can come back and reseal it. Talking about time frames that you can do something with sealant, it'll start skinning over in about 5 minutes. So after that time frame, when you go back and touch up things, you'll have a little thin layer of sealant skin, is what you would call it. Not really going to hurt anything at that point, but the sealant will be waterproof in 4 hours. Then in 48 hours, it is 80% cured. And then the remaining 20% of curing takes a full 30 days from the day you put it on. So if you needed to wash your RV roof, do that before you put sealant on. Don't do it right after you put sealant down. If you need to wash your RV roof after you've resealed, go ahead and do that 30 days after you have resealed. Now the other question is, I need to take a trip. Can I reseal my roof today and drive tomorrow? Well, with self-leveling sealant, it's still setting up and curing. So if you were to drive within that first 12 or even 24-hour time frame, that sealant is going to be really runny. And if you went on top of your roof after resealing and you've just driven with it, you'll see that sealant blowing almost like waves in an ocean. So you're going to mess up the bond on that sealant. So wait at least 12 to 24 hours before driving. So how many times can you reseal over RV sealant? It really depends on how thick it was put down. Right there was air bubble. Do you see that pop out? If you're paying attention to that, you can fill air bubbles in as they happen. Right now below that is air bubble. I'm working it down, put new sealant inside of that. Now I'll keep moving a little bit. That's natural. That happens with your RV sealant tubes. Now back to your question, how many times can you reseal over RV sealant? It's about 2 to 3 times you can reseal over your RV sealant. At that point, there'll be 3 to 4 layers of sealant. If it was put down thicker, I would say 3 layers. If it wasn't put down very thick, it'd be closer to 4. At that point, you would need to scrape off the sealant to get down to a new foundation, because if an RV roof has been resealed, let's say 3 times, now there's 4 layers of sealant, that foundation below that is probably dry and really hard, and it's going to have some leak issues down below that top layer of sealant. So scraping off and starting over is best once the sealant gets to be too thick. And that's what I did on the right hand side of this roof to show you scraping off sealant before resealing. And I'm at that point right now, so I'm going to switch over to the power caulk gun to show you how that works. Now I'm going to show you the JPX tips and how they work before I finish the rest of this with a power caulk gun. These tips are ideal to use with a power caulk gun, so you can put a nice good bead down. They put out a really wide band, so with a manual caulk gun, you don't get a nice even ribbon with these. This is a variety pack. There's a few different sizes in here. It really depends on the area that you are working with. You can see different widths. In this case, I'm going to use the narrower one. This is about 1 inch wide. Put the rest of them away. Okay, let me clean up a little dab that squeezed out of the Dicor tube. So how these work, cut your tip just like you would for putting sealant down. Put them on, give a little bit of a twist, and they'll lock right in place. Now sealant will flow out that wide. I wouldn't do this on a new seal like this because there's different levels to get the sealant. I'm going to use it on the right hand side, which still has existing sealant on it, so you can see how it would flow. Let me turn the caulk gun up. Right now it's on the lowest speed. I'm going to go just over 2 on this DeWalt power caulk gun. Every power caulk gun is going to be different for your speed levels. So you can see, it makes a nice wide even bead. That situation there is perfect. If you're doing a full roof, I would definitely be using those tips. It makes things flow easier and smoother. It's different than the welding process like I showed you over here. So how these tips work is they're designed to put out a wide ribbon of sealant, which helps push out air bubbles. Also, a power caulk gun helps push out air bubbles as you're going. You'll have less air bubbles using one of these power caulk guns, whether you have a tip on it or not, compared to a manual caulk gun. And if you had to switch tubes, you can pop these off, put them onto a new tube. So one tip will last you the whole roof if that's what you were doing. So I'm going to finish this with the regular sealant tip, weaving back and forth, and show you how most people would be resealing their roofs compared to using the wide tips. The reason I don't like these tips on a situation like this is because the tip is flat and there's different elevations here, and it's harder to get the sealant layered into those elevations because you need to be a little bit thicker here in the valley and not as thick on the top. This would make one even layer all the way across, and it's harder to get the sealant thicker in the center with using one of these. So if I was not filming this video, I would do it the same way I'm showing you by not using the tip. So now using just the tip, I'm going to turn it down to about 1 3/4 on the speed range. So I'll do the same process as the manual caulk gun, keep doing a strip, and then weave back and forth. A little bit too fast. Let me go closer to 1. This DeWalt gun is very, very finicky on the 1 to 2 range for your speed. So just like doing the relayer of sealant, I'm going just past where the old sealant was at. Make that one straight line as my outside boundary. Then I will come back and weave back and forth. Continue all the way to the edge of the roof. But here, I'm slowing down in that center section a little bit, so that way it's creating a thicker bead right there to make a nice, good, even bead to the top. That way it will keep things sealed up for a really long time. Now, how long before you should come back and check your RV roof sealant after putting new stuff down? Well, I wait till it fully cures, which is your 30-day time frame. If you wanted to see how good the job looks, you can come back later that afternoon or the next day. But to see how well the whole roof is doing, give it a full cure time. Now, how much sealant should you need to reseal your entire roof? It really depends on how many joints and seams that you have. Almost every RV has a front cap trim just like this one, and this is 3 to 4 tubes to get all the way across. And if you had multiple skylights and vents, you're going to add more sealant to it. The bigger the RV, the more sealant you will use. So a, say, 30-foot or smaller RV, you could be anywhere from 8 to 16 tubes. On a bigger RV, closer to 40 feet, with a couple skylights and multiple vents, you can easily be 20 to 25 tubes. Now, as you're watching this, there's probably somebody out there that says, hey, why don't you tape off the edges to make a nice clean line? Well, RV sealant is designed to flow out and naturally create a sealant layer. So what I mean by that is I created that line so the sealant will stop right about there. If you put tape down in that section, you can do that if you want things to look perfect. That is well above industry standard, certainly not needed. I also think by putting tape down, you can create some other issues because you are messing up the natural skin layer on the side of that sealant by peeling that tape up after it's put down. So the way I'm doing it here is how sealant manufacturers recommend resealing or sealing your roof. But if you want to put tape down, you can go ahead and do that. Almost done, has 1 inch to go. Now our front cap trim is fully sealed. Let me go back over here to show you the vent I was working on yesterday. All right, so this is a vent I scraped sealant off yesterday, and I wanted to show you putting sealant down, but there were some pop-up rain showers coming through, so I made sure it was sealed up so there was not any water leaks in this situation. But this was done the same process as that front cap. So I put a bead around here on the outside, a bead on the inside like this, weave my caulk gun back and forth, and as I'm touching that, you can see the sealant is still soft and pliable. It's skinned over, definitely waterproof, but it was still tacky a little bit when these leaves were flying down. I'll peel these up. Like I said, it's not going to hurt anything. So this sealant right now is 24 hours old. If you needed to drive with the RV, you certainly could. It's not going to blow anywhere. And you can see around the edge right here, there's a couple little bubbles. That is natural how RV sealant is put down. Where the sealant meets the RV roof, you'll see some ripples and bubbles. Even on Dycor's website, they talk about that, and those will mellow out over time. That's your sealant bonding to your RV roof material. So now I'm going to show you the difference between what I call a dollar store caulk gun and a good caulk gun. I went and bought this just to show you the difference. I would never put this in my toolbox. When I finish, it's going to the garbage. So this is my trim. I'm going to reseal. On these, doesn't even say here on the tip itself because it probably doesn't have a ratio to it. Like this one, you'll see 24:1, or 12:1, which I was switched onto. So that's the ratio that when you squeeze the trigger of how fast the sealant comes out. With this one, has a much shorter squeezes. As you can see, it's not coming out very even because I have to squeeze the trigger multiple times. And it's also very hard in the hand. If I use this as a professional RV repair person, I would probably have some wrist ergonomic issues. Oh. And air bubbles are definitely worse with this. The way it squeezes, I can't get an even bead. I am a lot thicker. Okay, so that was the dollar store caulk gun. Let me switch over. And you can pay attention to how many times I squeeze the trigger on this, and I can do it one-handed without a problem. So that's a nice, good, even bead. Not perfectly straight, but it's even. So I don't have to concentrate on squeezing the trigger as much. I can concentrate on the sealant I'm putting down itself. This is creating a nice, good, even weave just because the caulk gun is so much smoother. Now, get to the end here. You can see how the good caulk gun, it levels out really nice. In this one, you have a lot more mounds and squeezes in there. And all it is a better tool to put down the same product. And last, I'll show you how to patch a rip in your RV roof membrane. This could be caused from hitting a tree branch with your RV and poking a hole in the roof, or when you are scraping up sealant to do some resealing work, you stretch the membrane or poke a hole into it. Or in our case, we have an older roof, which is a little bit fragile on top and gummy, and the top layer of the roof material needs some patchwork to make sure it's not going to be a leak issue in the future. So let's get into it. First off, you'll need some turn-to-bond tape, and other supplies that you will need is a roller to press the tape in once it's applied, either some knife or scissors to cut your tape, and application-wise, so some alcohol and a soft towel like this, some gloves, and some Dycor sealant to seal the edges of tape once you are finished up. Now to answer a couple questions about using the tape on your roof. There's different types of tapes out there. I use authentic Eternabond tape. If you compare that to the look-alike tapes. The other tapes will not have a thick of sealant on the backside. So that gray layer is your layer of sealant that seals in place. If you had not Turnabond tape, you would see a bunch of lines and ripples in that, which does not create a nice, good, solid seal with the other tapes. So that's why I use this Turnabond tape. Costs a little bit more, but it's well worth it. And this tape is good for multiple different roof types, whether you have EPDM, TPO, PVC, fiberglass, or aluminum. It's made for all of those. And this roof we're working on today is EPDM, and I'll show you some details on how you can tell that once we're looking at the area we will be putting a little patch over top. Okay, I mentioned this roof is EPDM material, and with EPDM, as it ages, you'll see some cracking in the top layers of it. And sometimes that top layer becomes gummy, like over here. When I was doing this front cap sealant, my foot was over here and it just wore through the gummy layer. But you can see below that, there's a rubber below that. So there's still material that is keeping water out. But what I'm going to do is put the Turnabond tape over this section to make sure we have a nice good seal so I don't have to worry about water damage in this section. This does happen with EPDM roofs. So if you have an older RV that has EPDM type material, I would make sure if you're doing work around it, just walk slow, don't spin your foot, and if something does happen, you can go ahead and patch it just like I'm doing now. Now I'm going to use some 91% alcohol, put it onto my towel. I will clean off any loose dirt and debris in this section. It does not have to be, clean and bright just like it was from the factory. You just need to make sure all of the stuff that will prevent your tape from sticking is removed. You can see what's coming off. Part of that is the roof material itself, but most of that is dirt. That's why you don't want to go too harsh on this EPDM material so you don't remove more than you're trying to clean. Okay, the whole section is clean. Now we'll let this air dry for a minute or so that way everything is going to be nice and dry and nothing's going to prevent the Turnabond tape from sticking. In the meantime, I will get my tape prepped and ready. So I'm going to run the tape from just about that front cap to just past this section right there. I'll use my knife and cut it straight. So everything is nice and dry. On the back of the tape, there's a little plastic film layer. Now for putting down the tape, take off your gloves because this is designed to stick to rubber type material. It won't stick as bad to your hands, but it will stick to your gloves and you will mess up the back of the tape. I'll use my knife just to get the film on the back side started. I'll peel it back almost all the way so I can grip that end to pull it straight. You can see it sticking to my thumb on this side, but it will peel right off. So as you're putting it down, start with one side. Start smoothing it down so you don't create any air bubbles on the back side. Work the tape towards the area that you still have some of your film. Now we have a nice good flat layer of a Turnabond tape. Now this is where the roller comes in so you can press it into place. So I'll work my way back and forth across the whole piece of tape. Now our tape is down, nice and flat. This is stuck to the roof. You could leave this way if you wanted to, but as an extra layer of sealant protection, if you seal the edges of your tape with Dicor lap sealant, that'll make sure this edge doesn't peel up over time. and no water creeps below the tape to the roof material and makes a nice, good extra bond. Now, if you were putting down your tape in cold weather, this will stick, I think they say even below freezing, as long as your tape is warm before you put it onto your roof material. If you were putting it down when it's that cold, I would wait and come back and put the die-core on the outside once it warms up a little bit, but that tape can be put down in colder temperatures. Now, if you had a giant rip on the roof that was larger than this tape, and if you were out camping, you could put a couple layers of tape to go a wider section, but realistically, the rip should be smaller than the piece of tape you're putting down. You can get some wider Turn-A-Bond, like 6 inches wide, if you had a little bigger issue to work with. This is 4 inches, which works well in pretty much all situations when you have an issue on the roof, because typically if you hit a tree branch, it's a pretty small area. It's going to be ripped up a little bit, and this would cover that section. For this, I'll be using non-sag die-core on the lower portion because we're on a vertical surface. Self-leveling die-core would run down, and I'm going to run the non-sag die-core from this top edge here down along the bottom edge, and I will bond to this front joint up here just so it's an even seal. Then I'll use some white self-leveling across the top. I will flatten out nice and not trap any water. And I'm using black in this situation because the side of the RV is full body paint, and looking up from the ground, you will see the sealant right here. So black will blend in really well, just like the trim piece that's below it. If I put white there, it would just stand out more. You can use any color you want to. In this case, black looks better once it's going to be finished up. And I need to start from this way so I can pull back my sealant. Now, one little air bubble came out of my tube right there. I'm just going to feather that over with my finger. And up here towards the front cap trim, I'll make sure that blends in well. Now I'm going to switch over to the self-leveling. I'm just going to put one strip halfway covering the tape and halfway onto the roof. All right, now how long will a patch last on the roof? Well, according to a Turn-A-Bond, their roof tape is, I believe, 35 years, which is going to be longer than any RV roof will last. So this patch is actually going to be better than the roof material itself. It'll keep water out, seal really well, and there'll be no issues with that particular section. Of course, I'm getting some black die-core and stuff, but this will be a really nice patch for a long time. So don't worry if you have to put a patch in the roof. Tree branches happen. They fall off trees. You rub into things. As long as you're not ripping the whole roof off, you can always patch it and keep the water out. You won't have any future issues. Now, putting down patches is a whole different thing than putting a Turn-A-Bond tape over the whole roof. Not like covering the whole roof layer by layer. I'm talking about putting over all the seams and the joints. Some people will go through and put Turn-A-Bond tape over their front cap, around the skylight, around the vents, all over the roof, thinking that it's going to future-proof the roof where they won't have to go back and do any work to it. Now, this tape here I put down, you will still need to inspect this when you're looking at your roof sealant every 90 days to make sure the tape's not peeling up, nothing's wrong with it, the sealant isn't cracked, all those things just like any other spot on the roof. So it doesn't eliminate you having to inspect the roof, make sure things are good. But what happens when people Turn-A-Bond tape the whole roof of the RV, when there's multiple layers and that tape intersects on top of each other, it leaves little gaps where water can creep below that. Yes, you can put some sealant around that, but the other things that happen, if you have a lot of a Turn-A-Bond tape on the roof and the tape can expand and contract at different rates, which can create some bubbles between the tape and the roof material, and water gets in there, even if you seal the sides of it. As small patches like this, I don't see that, but when I see really large strips and big sections of a Turn-A-Bond tape, that's when I see that happen. Remember, you can find all the tools and supplies I use linked in the video description below. And if you want to see other videos I made on RV sealant, including changing the RV skylight, you can find that in the RV sealant playlist that's also linked below. And if you've watched all this and decided it's way too big of a job for you, if you need somebody to come out mobily, I'll link the RV Help Locator so you can find a tech near you to come out to your location. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you over in the next video.